And now it gives me huge pleasure to introduce the leader who has overseen the biggest ever growth in membership and the highest number of votes in a general election for the Green Party, Natalie Bennett.
Well, hello Bournemouth. It's great to be in this lovely town for the first time for a Green Party conference, so soon after it elected Simon as its first Green Party councillor, and just a year after the South West elected its first Green MEP. And hasn't Molly Scott-Cato done a great job? Now, I am aware that we are in this venue following the Liberal Democrats. We're getting used to taking seats away from the Liberal Democrats. But I promise you that's the only thing we'll be following them on. In the Green Party, we know what our policies are. We know that our values and principles are solid, unmovable foundations. We don't tack around with the political winds. We stand up for what we believe in. I know that many of you will be here at your first conference, but let's start by acknowledging the members who've been around longer. If you were a member of the Green Party before the 1st of January this year, please put your hand up. Thank you, you're all of our veterans. Now, who's joined after January 1st? Let's say welcome to the Green Surge. But I know that many of you Green Surge members are veterans too. Veterans of campaigning for free education, veterans of fighting against privatisation of the NHS, veterans of Transition Towns, Friends of the Earth, and many other organisations. Many new members have told me that they've come to realise that lobbying, campaigning, pushing against the closed doors of the old politics simply wasn't going to deliver the results that our economic, social and environmental crises demand. We cannot keep electing the wrong people and hoping that they'll do the right things. What we need to do is elect many more Greens in the proportional representation elections, the fair elections that are coming up next May in Wales, in London and in Scotland. Now, having started the way I did, I could ask the Green MP and the House of Lords member to put their hands up, but I don't think you actually need any help in identifying them. Of course, if we had a fair electoral system, Caroline Lucas would have 24 other Green MPs with her in the Commons. But the fact is that she, like Jenny Jones in the Lords, does the work of at least 25 MPs. And I promise you this is the last bit of audience participation. Who here is a Green Party councillor? Please put your hand up. I want to offer my thanks, our thanks, for all of your hard work. And I want to promise you that in the elections next May, we'll be electing many compatriots to join you. In Bristol, in Liverpool, in Sheffield, in many other towns and cities up and down the country, we've built a great foundation in the general election. In a year's time, I look forward to that question raising a veritable forest of hands. Quite appropriate for the Green Party, I think. For it's clearer by the day that the political times, they are a-changin'. It's the time of the new politics. Greek leader Alexis Tsipras this week, in his victory speech, thanked the European Greens for their support for a different kind of Europe. The clear re-election of Syriza in Greece and the strength of Podemos in Spain are just two examples of the future of politics in Europe. In Britain, you can measure that not just by the rise of Jeremy Corbyn to the Labour leadership, but by the Green Party's more than 1.1 million votes in the general election and the Green surge. And you can see it too by the left-positioned SNP's comprehensive wipeout of right-wing Labour in Scotland and the daily stronger surge of political activism across England and Wales and beyond. The pressure is growing against the failed politics of austerity, on the disastrous policy of privatisation of public services, on treating the planet as though it were a mine and a rubbish dump. This has to end. The failings of successive governments in Britain are attracting widespread attention, widespread concern, widespread opposition. The United Nations is investigating the Tories government's treatment of the disabled and breaches of their human rights. The United Nations. The world is increasingly questioning the Tory government's environmental failings. Al Gore led the way this week. Will our children ask, "Why didn't you act?" he said to David Cameron. Judges will also be questioning more and more the abuses of basic human rights and the destruction of civil liberties in the disastrous Trade Union Bill and the Snoopers Charter. Politics is heading towards the understanding that social and environmental justice are indivisible and essential to all of our futures. Politics is heading fast towards the policies that the Green Party has consistently pursued and promoted for decades. And politics is far more diverse than ever before, making the argument for long overdue electoral reform simply overwhelming. An issue that I hope Jeremy Corbyn will be putting at the top of his political agenda. For the fact is, the government only has a majority of 12, a fragile majority that's already dissolved on a couple of issues. United in a just cause, we can win electoral reform. Now, the new politics, the politics that demands electoral reform, is a people's politics founded in everyday lives, everyday struggles. On the streets, in community centres, in pubs and cafes, online, people are talking together, gathering together, working together, recognising in those immortal words, "Ye are many, they are few." Many of you, I'm sure, were on the streets on June 20th for the People's Assembly against austerity, and again this month at the massive, inspiring Refugees Welcome March. At both of these marches, people's assembled under many different banners, under the symbols of church groups and the flags of unions, under the homemade placards of the unaffiliated and the organised groupings of long-established campaigns. They were all saying, we're not going to take this anymore. No more austerity, no more privatisation of public services, no more planet trashing, and no more of this unfair, inhumane, unjust immigration system. The marchers got across their message, and more than that, they got the message that the Green Party is their party. For these growing, increasingly coalescing movements of people power need a political wing. They need representatives at the heart of the places where decisions are made, in local councils, in Cardiff and Westminster, in Brussels. Campaigners up and down the country are understanding that the Green Party is the natural home of the community campaigner and the Transitions Towns member, the natural home of the campaigner against NHS privatisation and the anti-evictions activist, the natural home of the immigration rights advocate and the defender of environments, local and global. Local parties, far stronger and more numerous than ever before, are able to reach into new parts of their communities, offering to be a guide through the frequently forbidding, deliberately opaque bureaucracy of town halls, Westminster and Brussels. Now, I know that some commentators are asking, what's the difference between Jeremy Corbyn's Labour and the Greens? Well, communities up and down the land who are dealing with Labour councils know one answer to that. They have Labour councils who are not listening to them, aren't meeting their needs, are too often in the pockets of the developers and big business. They have Labour councils who believe that despite all of the evidence, these councils believe that economic development comes from supporting an out-of-town supermarket that destroys local independent businesses by the score. When it comes to standing against planned nuclear plants from Hinkley to Anglesey to Hartlepool, when it comes to resisting the power of the oil and gas lobby supporting this government's fracking, underground coal gasification and coal bed methane fantasies, from Blackpool to Middlesbrough to Warwickshire, when it comes to resisting the concreting over of the Greenbelt for expensive, poor-quality homes made by mass builders out for a quick pound, it's the Green Party that consistently backs those communities. But we're not just following, we're also leading. And leading on the issue of climate change, the issue on which all of our futures as inhabitants of this one fragile planet depends. The Green Party is at the front of a broad push to make the Paris climate talks not just successful in their own terms, but to be a vehicle for tackling climate change at the heart of every community effort, the plans of every council, the work of every official. We've already launched our Climate Sense campaign. Yes, that's the hashtag, in case you were wondering. And this is the Green Party's Climate Sense Conference. Green parties and councillors are up and down the country at the forefront of a broad campaign to get institutions and pension funds to divest from fossil fuels. And we've joined with the European Green Party in calling on everyone to share their climate moment. The second that they, as individual human beings, recognised that climate change was here and present, and just how urgent it was to change direction before it's too late. For me, it was the 1st of January 2006. Yes, it was New Year's Day. It was time to make an assessment about the state of my life and the state of the world. Now, I'm unusual in British politics in that I have a degree in science, and I took the knowledge from that, looked at the state of the world, and it frightened me. I thought, I must do something. So I joined the Green Party, although I'd never have predicted that it would lead to me standing up here today. And I would not have predicted that in the leader debates before the general election, I would have been the only one to talk about climate change. That in 3.5 hours, the Labour leader, the Liberal Democrat leader, the Conservative leader, the SNP leader, the Plaid Cymru leader, none of them would find the space to utter those two momentous words, climate change. That has to change. It has to change now. We cannot, we must not have one more political debate that does not have climate change at its heart. But I'm a strong believer that deeds, not words, are what matter the most when it comes to tackling climate change. It does not bode well that just 2 months before the crucial Paris climate talks, the Prime Minister last week appointed a fossil fuel industry insider as his key advisor on energy and environment. This isn't just disappointing, it's scandalous. If the Prime Minister is even halfway serious about the success of the Paris climate talks and tackling the threat of climate change to our security, prosperity, and the natural world, he should ask for Stephen Hyderi Robinson's resignation with immediate effect. And instead, he should appoint an advisor without association to climate-destroying industry. Because the green economy in the UK is a huge success story, often in spite of government policy. So he won't be short of options. The disastrous government energy and environment policies has to end. It has to change now. As the Pope said just this week, this is a critical moment in history. The problem cannot be left for future generations to deal with. Dealing with climate change has to be at the centre of every policy, every decision, the responsibility of everyone. If we don't make that a reality, our children and our grandchildren will never forgive us. And as part of the work towards that, today I'm issuing a special request to every Green Party up and down the country. I ask you to arrange at least one public meeting to raise this issue up the agenda in your community before the Paris climate talks. More, I'm asking everyone listening to take action. Organise a meeting about climate change in your community, in your union, in your university, school or college, even in your local pub. The next few weeks are critical. Please play your part. For in Scotland, we saw that a grassroots referendum campaign drew many into political involvement, into issues local and global. We can do the same by taking understanding of the issues around climate change into the heart of every community. Let's summon up to draw on Abraham Lincoln, every better angel of our human nature, to this great, the greatest cause. Together, we can ensure that everyone has the chance to find out more, to understand that tackling climate change isn't just essential, but also a positive framework that can improve our societies, our lives, and the lives of future generations. But I'd urge everyone not to pin all of their hopes on the Paris climate talks, but to see this as a stepping stone, one branch of a plan to reshape our societies to live, to thrive, to meet the needs of future generations on this fragile planet. I'm going to borrow a phrase from the campaign organisation 350.org. This is the point where everything breaks apart and everything comes together. But we can only protect our planet in a fair and humane society. That's absolutely at the core of Green Party values and principles, and it's at the core of solving our climate crisis. For the Green Party is the solutions party. We know that the crises we face in our economy, in our society, in our environment, are not happening at the same time by coincidence. The cause, the nature of our economic system, the hyper-capitalism of the multinational oil giants and the sweatshop-based fashion trains, the sea life-destroying giant trawlers and the cruel, destructive factory farms, the hugely subsidised private landlords and the zero-hours contract employers, they are all part of the same system. And that system has to change. And the solutions to deal with the crisis needed to tackle these together, it's joined up thinking, the kind of thinking that's in the Green Party's DNA. And it's thinking that demands real change. When it comes to dealing with our social and environmental crises, only 21st century thinking will do. We can't go back to the failed 20th century answer of perpetual growth. That cannot continue on a finite planet. We can't go back to the failed 20th century model of centralised administrative monoliths, imposing models on diverse local communities. We can't go back to the idea of a wasteful industrial economy built around giant companies. We need new solutions. The Green Party has long championed treating our homes as the critical national infrastructure that they are. A plan to lift 9 out of 10 households out of fuel poverty, to create at least 100,000 jobs and to cut carbon emissions. That's not bad for just one green policy. And the Green Party has long demanded investment in public transport, not the botched, illogical HS2, but I've got a real view on that one down there. Not HS2, but the local and regional schemes that help to rebalance our economy, linked to local bus services under the controlling hand of local councils. Such a transport policy would not only tackle air pollution and congestion, but also help the NHS dealing with obesity and diabetes. It's not bad for just one green policy. And we've long understood that the only secure, sustainable economic future is based in strong local economies, with local needs met by local suppliers, with a rich ecology of farming, manufacturing and service businesses supporting each other. Think global, act local is a long-term green vision and an essential one for all of our futures. But there's no doubt that there are forces out there, powerful forces with huge amounts of cash and influence, who want to keep things just as they are. But every day their power wanes. They have to struggle harder for a grubbier, weaker hold. They are in a crisis of legitimacy. They cannot be trusted. They're rotten to the core. Now, I was going to say that the Emperor has no clothes, but after the news reports of the last week, I'm not going to inflict that image on you. Even better, I've carefully combed through this speech to ensure there are no porcine references at all. What I will refer to about Lord Ashcroft's book is his self-declaration that he expected the donation of millions of pounds to buy him a place at the heart of British government. The core is rotten, it must be removed. And that's also true of our financial sector. The list of scandals is almost endless, from LIBOR to forex rigging, from PPI to money laundering and tax evasion. The finance sector, as it currently is arranged, exists not to serve the real economy, but to fuel speculation in financial instruments and property that's become entirely detached from the reality of homes and businesses, to fund its own empty structure. And it expects to be propped up by the sweat and pain of communities far from the glass towers of Canary Wharf when it falls again. That must not happen. Now, we've seen just this week another emerging scandal, yet another one. A giant, respected global car manufacturer has confessed, after it was exposed, to rigging tests about the emissions about 11 million diesel cars that it has manufactured and put on the streets. And there are questions now, was it just that manufacturer? Our politics is rotten. Our finance sector is rotten, our industrial sector is rotten, and even some of our sport is tainted. FIFA, in control of the beautiful game, is rotten. The people newly engaged in politics, the people of Britain, if not the people currently running things, see very clearly that we cannot continue as we are. Increasing number of Britons understand instinctively that David Cameron's so-called recovery, built chiefly on consumer debt, has no firm foundations. And that's particularly clear to the people in Wigan and Rhyl, Gateshead and Ramsgate, and the many communities that have seen precious little sign of this recovery at all. They're deeply worried, as people across Britain are worried, about the kind of world we're leaving future generations. Realism, real realism, means understanding that massive change is coming. And it can be, if we make the right choices, pursue the right policies, change for the better. To achieve that, we need new political structures, as well as new economic, social and environmental structures. To get those, we need to break the shackles of a 19th century electoral system. There's one number that, if you take one number away from today, I'd urge you to remember. That's 24%. That's the number of eligible voters who supported this Tory government. Even if you count the people who chose to vote, the Tories only won 37%. As a Swedish Green Party minister said to me recently, you surely can't form a government with that. The route to electoral reform isn't clear and obvious before her. If we lived in an ideal world, the Tory government would say, well, clearly the current situation is intellectually and morally untenable, and we'll have to introduce proportional representation elections for both the Commons and the new House of Lords. But don't worry, I'm not holding my breath. What I am doing is asking Jeremy Corbyn, as the new leader of the Labour Party, in the Parliament where the Tories have an extremely narrow majority, to join with us, with others, to deliver a fair, simple system in which voters can participate with confidence that their vote counts. Already, the Green Party is working with campaigners, working with other parties to keep electoral reform, a proportional, fair electoral system on the political agenda. And if that gives Nigel Farage the chance to photobomb me in the mirror, so be it. But we don't have to wait for electoral reform. For coming up, we've got votes in already reasonably fair elections, in which voters can simply vote for what they believe in. These elections are in London for its assembly, in Wales for its assembly. In Scotland, our sister party has a great chance to increase their parliamentary representation to historic highs. And in Northern Ireland, our fellow Greens will be seeking to increase their assembly numbers from 1 to 3. You'll be hearing from Pippa Bartolotti, leader of the Welsh Greens, later today about the exciting prospects of our first Assembly members in Cardiff. And on Sunday, you'll be hearing from Sian Berry, our London mayoral candidate, about the prospects for growth in the Assembly representation. And I've got a little tip for you. The bookies have Sian's odds of waking up as London Mayor on May 6 considerably shorter than Jeremy Corbyn's were during his campaign. But next May, the prospects are much broader than that. Since the general election, I've been travelling up and down the country and revisiting new and revived local parties, already gearing up for next May's council elections, aiming, some of them, to win their first councillors, some to build their local representation, to be the challengers, the critical scrutinisers that are lacking on so many councils. In Hitchin, in Hertfordshire, which I visited for the town's first ever anti-austerity rally in June, I met Green Party campaigners already out knocking on doors for the elections in 11 months' time. In Swansea, I heard from Green Party members how they're working on the ground, at the grassroots, literally, rescuing the abandoned Ganges field from litter, vandalism and council neglect, turning it back into the community asset it should always have been. And in Darlington, which I visited first 2 years ago for the founding rally of what would become the brilliant 999 call for the NHS campaign, I was delighted just last week to attend the formal founding of a new local party. Now, that was their first AGM, but in May, they, from a standing start, put up a candidate in nearly every ward in the town, and they aim, with many others, to elect their first councillors next year. Now, these are local Green parties that are seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And more than that, they are feeling the tide of history approaching. Here in Bournemouth, as you heard from Simon, we've been consistently supporting the proposed wind turbines of the Navitas Bay offshore wind farm. Sadly, only the latest victim of this government's disastrous energy policies. Of course, the government had to tackle a difficult concept. The wind turbines are big, but they're far away. But the Navitas Bay developers can subject this arbitrary decision to judicial review, as I hope they will, just as we can use democratic and legal mechanisms, international mechanisms, to hold this government to account. And now, this morning's news of their cancellation by Drax of their carbon capture project. The government's energy policies have failed, and you've even got the Confederation of British Industry complaining bitterly about them. This has to change. The rotten politics, the old politics, is in its last throes. Politics is moving in our direction. Historians will look back and see 2015 as the year that change started, that a year that saw a fundamental shift in politics, away from the mantra that greed is good, the environment doesn't matter, that rose with Margaret Thatcher and will fall with David Cameron. It's time for a new approach, the green approach, a society that works for the common good within the environmental limits of our one fragile planet. A society that works for people, not for a few global corporations and the richest 1%. That's what green parties around the globe, green movements around the globe are working for. In Norway, the Greens have just recorded their best ever election result, and that on a platform of calling for the end of all oil production there within 20 years. In Rwanda, the Green Party's bravely leading the struggle to defend a democratic constitution. In the European Parliament, the Greens group is leading the way in calling for a fair, just, humane treatment of refugees across the Union and beyond it. The problem... God. The problems we face in Britain and around the world are huge. We need to think big to deal with them. We need a politics powered by people, communities powered by renewables, our economy powered by small businesses, cooperatives and social enterprises. We need a politics of the people. We need green politics. If you are facing decades of unpayable student debt, join us and fight it. If you are stuck in a 0 hours, low-paying job, join us and fight for jobs you can build a life on. If you're disabled or been ill and suffered from the dreadful work capability assessment, join us and fight it. If you've suffered under our abusive, inhumane, unjust immigration system, join us and fight it. If you believe that Britain should get rid of Trident, those hideous weapons of mass destruction, join us and fight them. And if you believe that Britain should not be bombing Syria, following the disastrous policy that's had such dreadful consequences for the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. Join us and fight against that policy. And if you are a parent or a grandparent who cares about your children's and grandchildren's future, join us and fight for their future on a livable planet. Politics should be something that you do, not something that's done to you. 2015 can be, must be, the start of the century of green politics. Let's get together and make it happen.